works in mysterious ways. God works in mysterious ways. Hope is the thing with feathers is what we heard in the call to worship just a few minutes ago. I really wrestled with the words I was going to try to say this morning. Each day this week, a moment would occur throughout the day, and I would feel that spirit moving me to say, this is the topic. This is the subject matter that I've been waiting for. And then something else would occur, and I would shake my fist and say, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. But one day the Spirit was moving me to talk about optimism when we feel like strangers in a strange land. Times feel so confusing right now, so how do we remain optimistic when the world feels this way? Maybe another time for this topic. Another day I was moved to talk about friendship and how that can breathe new life into our souls when times feel tough. We have so many wonderful new faces here in our community in recent months, and those relationships have been inspiring. They have restored hope. Again, maybe for another time. But I found myself again coming back to my favorite word, which is hope. I have spoken about it before. The first time I was up here, I did. But it was more in the context of how incredible it is to witness individuals who still have hope when it seems as though the world has crashed down upon them. Today, I want to again touch upon hope, but in a different setting. But before I go there, hope is the thing with feathers. As I mentioned, I really struggled with words for this morning. I was about ready to tear up these sheets yesterday, and maybe we would just sit in silence for a half hour. Who knows? I've mentioned it before, but my father passed away when I was 3. Obviously, at that age, you have little memories of what happened during that time, but I have one. My father would bring me out into the field and we would hunt for bird feathers. And this wasn't for 5 minutes. I was obsessed. We would spend hours walking around looking for them. And still to this day, I find myself walking with my head down, just looking. Yesterday, Pastor Dwayne and I had our usual Saturday morning check-in. He was asking if everything looked good for tomorrow. I expressed I just wasn't finding the words. I hadn't looked over the bulletin yet, so when we hung up, I did just that, and there it was, the passage that Joy had picked, feathers. I wanted to share that experience from yesterday, as oftentimes hope is restored in mysterious ways. There were 2 instances this week that led me to go down the path that I landed on this morning. The first was Wednesday morning. Our organizing committee was getting ready to call our meeting to order, but before that, Pastor Dwayne made a joke. He said that I looked, and I quote, especially terrible today. This group has quickly become comfortable with each other, so the occasional cracking wise happens throughout our time together. A sidebar, I know we all get the serious Pastor Dwayne delivering messages each week, but don't let that fool you, he's quite funny. But Pastor Dwayne's observation wasn't too far off the mark. I was feeling a little tired on that particular morning. And I know from conversations with some sitting here this morning and others throughout the week that this seemed to be a common thread of how many are feeling. The next instance occurred on Friday morning. One of our friends was sitting on the corner, and as I was making my way to the front door, I stopped to chat for a few. I asked, "How are you doing this morning, friend?" And their response was, "I am tired. I just wish more people would say hi to me." It is brought up in numerous other messages delivered in recent times that our church isn't defined by the 4 walls that we're sitting in. It's defined by the people that are gathered here as one. Some of us here today may feel like we are broken and way past being able to be fixed. Some of us are tired from the events across the globe. It's endlessly heartbreaking. Some of us are burnt from work or the stresses of navigating the day-to-day. Some of us here may be so tired that we are questioning our faith and some other things that we have held so tightly to get us through dark times. There is no doubt that life is hard. The journey, in many instances, is not easy. Stresses come at us from all angles. But most times, as humans, we just power through. We find ways to get through whatever obstacles or tasks that may be in front of us. But oftentimes there comes a point At least I know this is how it is for me, that you just stop and say, I need rest, or I need to just put my head on someone's shoulder and take a deep breath. As I was reading and looking for inspiration or guidance for this morning, I came across an example of what life can look like for most of us that I wanted to share. Think of life as a piece of paper, and this will be hard to see for some in the back. On each side of that piece of paper, there are inch margins. They are typically used to take notes, jot down ideas, or in the example of life, maybe write something down that you wanted to do in that week that would bring you joy or comfort. Call up an old friend, take a walk, listen to your favorite music, anything. That extra space on the side makes it look less chaotic. But most of our lives look like this. We fill our calendars. We can't say no. Things keep coming up and we must tend to. And all of a sudden we lose hope that it'll ever slow down. We grow tired. So what can we do? I often don't think of Jesus as someone who got tired. What always comes to mind for me is the endless acts of kindness, the spreading of words, and how to treat one another, how to stand up for what we know is right. But in the words today, we find a few examples of how Jesus is just like us. The first is on his journey back to Galilee. He was traveling, sharing his message, and at one point on the journey, he passed through Sychar, a town in Samaria, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. In the reading, it says, Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from his journey, sat by the well. It was noon. The logical conclusion is that Jesus was tired from walking. The sun was probably blazing as he made his journey back to Galilee, but the striking words in those passages was that he was tired. Just a few weeks back, one of our organizing meetings, we heard the story of a gentleman who was walking almost 5 miles to get to work because of location and lack of accessibility to public transportation. And he spoke of being absolutely exhausted at the end of the day. Modern day examples of this all the time. In Matthew 8, it talks about Jesus sleeping through a massive storm while he was on the boat with his disciples. There are many ways to look at these particular words. I know that story speaks of disciples having faith in Jesus, and the stories that came before speak of healing. But what struck me the most, that maybe, just maybe, he was able to find rest during the chaos, during the storm, because he was surrounded by those he loved. To me, those two instances of humanizing Jesus helped me, and hopefully help us understand that it is okay to feel the weight of life sometimes, and feel tired from walking this journey. But what is it as a church? What is our job as a community of one when these instances arise? Well, isn't it to restore hope, to share the burden, to share the joy, to be there for one another no matter how we might be feeling, because we can feel exhausted in moments of happiness. That brief passage from Galatians sums up for me a simple way to go about the walk together. It says that carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. I want us to now try something together. Outside of daily prayer, how many of us, by a show of hands, spend a moment throughout the day in just silence? Okay. And I don't mean checking our phones in silence. I mean just sitting quietly, listening for the voice of that mysterious spirit. I was encouraged by a therapist that I saw in my mid-20s to sit for 20 minutes each day to try to tune out the stresses and focus on just being. It was during a difficult stretch, and he thought this would be a good exercise. I did it for 2 years, every day. Now, I don't want us to sit here for 20 minutes and do it, but can we spend 2 minutes in just silence, in just being? my reason for us doing this together is that you can also find rest and in turn restoration in community. You and I were not created to function alone. While the individual rest is important, communal rest is just the same. And think of it, not the physical act of rest, but in the actions that can occur in rest and recovery. Think about this simple example for one moment, and we hear this all the time, that a smile can change the trajectory of someone's day. Let's go a little deeper. What if that smile, or that saying hello, or stopping to chat, or just sitting with someone, taking in the sounds around you, were all that was needed to allow someone to take a deep breath, sit back, have some faith, and have hope restored? With knowing that so much requires us to do it together, those stresses, that tiredness, well, it just grows and grows and grows. And that's where the hope starts to deteriorate. If you recall messages that are shared here every week, I would be hard-pressed to find one that doesn't include togetherness. Last week, Lisa talked about Barbara and life lessons together. Pastor Dwayne talks about 2 by 2 constantly, and so many other examples of the importance of that idea. This idea of regaining hope when we are tired and weary is no different. I do feel Jesus was able to be at peace, to find some rest during that chaotic storm because he was in the presence of those he cared for, and in return, those who cared for him. After that Wednesday morning, where I apparently looked like an old catcher's mitt, I had a conversation with a friend. We laughed, we talked about life, and at the end of it, a weight was lifted. I may still have looked like that catcher's mitt, but my soul was restored, hope was restored, and for the first time, I was able to rest. Look after one another, love one another. The simple action can restore hope and give us rest and strengthen those things we need to see things through to the other side. Our faith, our trust in God. God bless you.
Amen.